This wasn't the Iraq I expected. A place bursting with life, hospitality, gleaming malls, and some of the biggest religious and historical sites in the world. After all, Iraq sits at the heart of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization itself. But first, we arrived in Baghdad on Christmas Day. For a majority Muslim land, the Iraqis sure embrace the spirit of Christmas nearly everywhere. After checking in, our local guide Hayder took us to central Baghdad, where streets were alive with vendors selling warm winter clothing. Saddam Hussein is long gone, ISIS is no more, and people have clearly moved on. We took a water taxi to cross the lifeline of ancient Mesopotamian civilization, the Tigris River, and arrived at the famous Al-Mutanabbi Street. Often called the Booksellers Street, is Baghdad's literary and cultural hub, lined with bookstores and cafes where people gather to read, talk, and drink tea. It's very popular, especially on Fridays when the atmosphere is at its best. When we were there, locals kept coming up to our group to welcome us and ask for selfies. I felt like a K-pop star here. After years of conflict and sanctions, many Iraqis are genuinely happy to see foreigners, hopeful that the world will finally see the country differently. After all, Iraq has so much to offer, as you'll see in this video. Just around the corner is Mustansiriyah Madrasah, one of the oldest universities in the world. Founded in 1227, it was closed to visitors, but our local guide managed to get it open just for us. Over the centuries, Baghdad has nurtured a long line of thinkers, from Sumerians inventing writing to the first mathematicians. The madrasa itself taught Islamic law, medicine, mathematics, literature, and science, though it's no longer a functioning school. From here, we made our way to the Martyr's Monument, an iconic landmark. The blue domes honor Iraqi soldiers killed in war, but were closed off when we visited. Later, we headed to Regina Murad Pasha's house, an old Iraqi house turned tea house for some meat bread. The house once belonged to one of Baghdad's wealthiest women, who hosted business, politics, and social gatherings here. But long before modern Iraq existed, this land was home to some of the world's most powerful civilizations. The signs are everywhere. South of Baghdad is an arch that dates back to the Sassanian-Persian Empire. Once part of a royal palace complex, it was built entirely of brick without steel or concrete. For centuries, it was the largest single-span arch in the world, and this region led the world in architecture. But this was just the start. The next day, we will be traveling to the very root of human civilization. So we ended the day with masgouf, a quintessential Iraqi dish. Fresh river cod from the Tigris River is cooked low and slow over open flames, a method that goes back thousands of years. This creates flesh that's tender, smoky, and full of flavor, earning its status as Iraqi's national dish. On day 2, we made the hour-long drive to Babylon. 3,000 years ago, this was once one of the most powerful places on Earth. At that time, scholars here were writing some of the first laws, mapping the stars, and inventing systems that would shape the world. It may even have been home to the legendary Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Alexander the Great, the famous conqueror, died here in 323 BC, at the center of his empire. The first thing we saw was the Ishtar Gate, well, a replica of it. It was a statement of power, wealth, and artistry, designed to impress both visitors and the gods. The rest of Babylon is mostly eroded mud brick, with long stretches of open ground. Much of what you can see was rebuilt under dictator Saddam Hussein, who saw himself as a modern version of Babylonian ruler Nebuchadnezzar. That said, if you look closely enough, you may be able to spot some original parts. In the distance, looming over the ancient ruins, stands an impressive palace. It was built in the 1980s by Saddam to further link himself to the legacy of Babylon's ancient kings. However, After 2003, US forces used it as a military headquarters until 2011, leaving behind graffiti and broken fittings. It's closed to visitors and you need a special permit to enter, one that our guide somehow managed to get for our group. Walking through the palace was surreal, like entering a famous stranger's home. We saw Saddam's bedroom, his bathroom, and the lavish halls that were once filled with luxury, all perched above Babylon. Later, we drove to Karbala, to a restaurant our guide swore served the best kebab in Iraq. Maybe because it was long past lunchtime, it was seriously delicious. Iraq is the heartland of Shia Islam, and nowhere is that clearer than in Karbala. It's where Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, was martyred in 680 AD. Because of its religious importance, women, including foreigners, are expected to cover their hair and dress modestly while in the city. So our guide got my wife an abaya to wear. Surrounded by pilgrims, we visited the two main shrines here. The first is Imam Hussein's, marking when he was killed for standing up against injustice. This is his final resting place, and the inside was unlike anything I had ever seen. Overwhelmingly grand, covered in gold, mirrors, and detail at every turn. It was easily the most extravagant place I've seen in my life. Just across is the Al-Abbas shrine, dedicated to his half-brother, who died trying to bring water to the women and children during the same battle. After visiting the shrine, we went to a mall. Clearly, I had an outdated image of Iraq because the sleek interiors and global brands really surprised me. We wrapped up the day with fast food, a universal comfort that seems to span all cultures. On day 3, we headed to Najaf, another holy city. Everything here revolves around Imam Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. Shia Muslims believe he's the rightful successor to the Prophet, and his shrine dominates the city. In fact, this is the third of 5 holiest Islamic sites after Mecca and Medina. For this reason, just outside Najaf lies Wadi al-Salam, the largest cemetery in the world. Row after row of graves stretch to the horizon, as far as the eye can see. That's because people travel from across the region hoping to be buried near Imam Ali for spiritual merit. At his shrine, we witnessed coffins being brought in one after another to be blessed, each destined for Wadi al-Salam right after. When we stepped inside, every inch of the shrine sparkled like a shimmering marble palace. But what stood out most was the devotion. For many Shia Muslims, this is one of the most important places on earth. After a quick coffee stop, we continued south, only stopping for a hearty meal of dolma. This is Iraqi comfort food made with stuffed vegetables. They say homemade is best, but we settled for restaurant quality. Later in the evening, we enjoyed falafel pita sandwiches, served piping hot and topped with pickles. A delicious end to our third day. The next morning, we were back on the road. After the ancient city of Babylon and the holy shrines in Karbala and Najaf, we traveled to the cradle of civilization. Here, in the Mesopotamian marshes, we found the wetlands that made life here possible in the first place. We took a boat ride with local boatmen whose families have worked these waterways for generations. This way of life stretches back thousands of years, tied to the same rivers that once fed ancient Mesopotamia. However, the marshes were once far larger than they are today. In the 1990s, Saddam Hussein ordered much of them drained, devastating communities and wildlife. Only in recent years have parts of the marshes begun to recover. Something interesting to spot are water buffaloes. They're central to daily life here, providing milk, food, and income, just as they have for centuries.
ولا يا بعيد ولا يمر مرة يا علي.
In true Iraqi hospitality, our group was invited into one of the village huts for a cup of hot tea. They are built from natural materials from the marshlands, a perfect example of how people had lived in harmony with nature. From the waterways, we turned our eyes to the desert. We arrived in Ur, one of the oldest cities on earth. This is where some of the earliest city dwellers learned to organize life itself. Long before borders, before religions as we know them, people here were shaping what civilization will become. Rising above this ancient landscape is one of the world's earliest monumental structures, the Ziggurat of Ur. Built over 4,000 years ago by Sumerian king Ur-Nammu, it was a massive temple dedicated to the moon god Nana. Very few of such temples survive in any recognizable form. In fact, for a country often only seen through the lens of conflict, it's home to some of the rarest monuments in human history. It made me wonder how many people will never get to see these places simply because of politics, fear, or prejudice. To end the day on a sweet note, our guide brought us to a famous bakery on the outskirts of Baghdad. Stepping inside felt like entering Candyland. The counters were packed with pastries and sweets in every direction, and the smell was heavenly. The staff were incredibly welcoming, insisting we try sample after sample, eager to share a taste of their local favorites. Some of us tried to pay but were waved away like guests at a friend's home. When we went upstairs, once again Iraqi hospitality showed itself as the store sent up complimentary plates of sweets and hot tea for us. It's moments like these that stayed with us far longer than any attraction. The next day, we headed north towards Samarra, a city that was once the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. This dynasty ruled much of the Islamic world in the 8th and 9th centuries. The Mawiyya minaret is a massive spiral tower twisting skyward, built over 1100 years ago as part of the Great Mosque of Samarra. In its heyday, a muezzin will walk up the spiral ramp up to 5 times a day to call the faithful to prayer. Nearby stands the Abu Dulaf Mosque with a smaller spiral tower that we got to climb. Going up was incredibly daunting. The steps were narrow, there were no railings, and the spiral seemed to go on forever. Today, the mosque feels isolated, almost forgotten, but it was once part of the largest cities of its time. Our next stop took us even further back in time, Hatra. Built around the 1st to 2nd century AD, this was once the capital of one of the earliest Arab kingdoms, sitting at a crossroads between the Roman and Parthian worlds. Architecturally, Hatra feels completely different from southern Iraq. Instead of baked bricks, the city was built from stone, giving it a look closer to places like Petra or Palmyra. Massive walls, towering arches, and wide courtyards hint at how powerful and wealthy this city once was. The site was occupied by ISIS for 4 years, and parts of it were damaged in that time. We even found bullet shells on the ground. With a bit of help, we were allowed up onto the roof just in time to watch the sun set over the ruins. From Hatra, we drove a few hours to Mosul, where we would be spending the night. But first, dinner. Iraq's street food scene is alive and hard to resist, with options everywhere you look. After some debate, most of the group went for falafel yet again, while a few of us grabbed lamb stew sandwiches instead. Mosul was cold, and we greeted locals warming up with small fires on our way to the old bazaar. The city was once one of Iraq's most important because it linked Anatolia, Persia, and the Arab world. Mosques and churches are packed tightly together, reflecting this mix of cultures. The bazaar itself was also where silk, spices, and textiles were brought together by merchants from across the region. Sadly, in recent years, Mosul faced unimaginable destruction. In 2014, ISIS took over and large parts of the city were destroyed. 80% of the old city, buildings, homes and streets were reduced to rubble. In fact, it was in the Mosul Grand Mosque that ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was first seen. Walking the streets today, you can still see haunting evidence of the destruction. Thankfully, after the city was liberated, rebuilding began in some parts. One example is the famous Al-Hadba minaret, reconstructed to match its original slanted shape. The local community has also come together to restore what it can. The Mosul Heritage Museum is part of that effort, with a small but meaningful collection showcasing the city's long and multicultural history. Then there's a Mosul Heritage Art House, started by a local man named Shams. He collects old artifacts to preserve Mosul's past, making sure it won't be forgotten. Every visitor to his house has a photo taken, and you can tell the project is close to his heart. Mosul has its own local food, one of them being kuba. Bulgur dough is rolled into a thin circle filled with seasoned meat, then sealed and boiled. Warm, savory and satisfying, it's a snack that's been enjoyed for generations. Next, we drove further north, leaving Mosul behind. The road stretched toward the mountains and eventually we arrived in Erbil, the capital of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which has its own semi-autonomous government and flag. As you walk through the town, a festive energy hung in the air as people prepared to welcome the new year. Erbil seemed a little different from the other cities we visited, with some women in western clothes mixed with traditional attire. With far fewer active conflicts, the city is also considered one of the safest parts of Iraq. We spent our final night in Iraq, strolling the street stalls, tasting local snacks, and soaking in the colorful, bustling atmosphere. As we said goodbye to this amazing country, I realized this trip was about far more than history or conflict. It was about the people we met, their warmth, and finally experiencing a side of the world that so few ever get to see. If you enjoyed this video, then you might like our time in Syria. Click here to watch it now.